Hello, everyone who's jumping on. Just let me know if you can hear me. Give it a couple minutes and I'll jump right into it.
I can hear you.
Awesome. Thank you. Are you able to see the screen, Vanessa?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, great. Well, I will just kick it off. Um, Thank you all for jumping on for this webinar. I'm kind of getting an understanding of the roadmap for replacing your 9 to 5 with Airbnb investing. My name is Max Paris. I have been with Good Neighbor for about 4 years now. Um, my current kind of portfolio background is I own 4 properties. One's a short-term rental in Wheat Ridge area here in Colorado. One's a long-term, kind of close to City Park. And then I have a primary residence in Lakewood that I'm eventually hopefully trying to turn into a house hack possibility. And then I have a mountain home in California as well. I own 4 commercial development properties. They are fractional ownership in California as well, since I'm originally from California. But those are an interesting situation, but it's kind of cool to kind of be in the commercial side of things. And then kind of what I do with Good Neighbor, obviously, is I'm an agent and I focus on short-term rentals. But I also have kind of a passion with fixer-uppers and things like that. All my properties that I own are fixer-uppers. My short-term rental has an unfinished basement that I'm planning on building out, and been kind of working on it throughout the past few years that I've had it. My long-term property, I lived in over by City Park, and I completed pretty much ripped it down to studs and redesigned it, and now I'm renting it long term. And then my current primary is another project that I'm taking on and slowly updating and changing and replacing. The bathrooms I've recently done, redoing the whole kitchen, things like that. And yes, my wife is not really happy with it, especially with the newborn that we just had about a month ago. So they're all fun projects, but in regards to that, I just enjoy the fixer upper side, being able to kind of see what you can do and develop into properties, and it does play a big part with short term rentals. If you can find a home that has the potential of turning into a pretty unique home, it plays a big part. Jumping into the introduction, as it said, it's pretty much kind of get an understanding of a roadmap of taking your 9 to 5 job and hopefully replacing it with short term rental investing or just overall investing in general. Kind of what I'm going to do is kind of walk you through a high level degree of the steps that are done to really get a successful Airbnb launched and then being able to scale and build that out. Um, First step is what to look for when searching for a short term rental, kind of go through the loan types and purchase options. How to build out and design for success. And then the big one is taking advantage of the tax loophole. And then some of the automations that really help streamline this whole process that you can, take all these steps necessary to have one a successful Airbnb that you're going to be making pretty good returns on, and then scaling this over time to be able to realize the overall return on your investments and income you're making on a yearly basis from these properties can really replace that 9 to 5 job. Not saying, you have to quit and do something like that, but being able to get that supplemental income through this whole process really makes a huge difference long term, and being able to possibly retire early or even, shift into building out your portfolio of short-term rentals throughout, Colorado or even the United States, and finding these different areas that are going to be successful, and getting that supplemental income to replace your 9 to 5 job. And then jumping into this, obviously, just a quick pause. Hopefully, hold any questions to the end. If you do have a question or I didn't cover something, let me know. I'm happy to kind of stop or anything. Let me see if there's anything in the chat. But yeah, feel free to let me know anything in the chat. But I'm trying to go through it, everything, and all the questions, and then the overall presentation. Then we can kind of jump into questions at the end. So what I'm going to dive into first is what you're looking for in an Airbnb. When you're looking and kind of going into the beginning process of wanting to purchase an Airbnb or purchase a home to make an Airbnb as your portfolio, there's a few things that really make a big difference. I'm going to start with the Metro and Denver Metro in particular, but this can apply with Metro throughout the United States. And then the next slide, we'll kind of jump into the mountain properties, but in regards to metro and within the city environment, a big key part is going to be a bedroom count. Bedroom count plays a huge part in actually seeing your overall return on your investment and your revenue numbers increasing. If you're able to fit, up to 12 to 15 people into your property, it's going to make a huge difference. Your nightly rates are going to be much higher, and being able to charge a lot more and seeing that return on your overall yearly return is going to make a huge difference compared to a 6 or 8 bedroom or 8 person occupancy home. Getting up to the 12 to 13 is going to, you almost can double that nightly rate. That plays a huge part. I made an example of my Wheat Ridge property. It's currently a 3-2, but it has an unfinished basement that I'm planning on building out to turn it into a 5-3. And if I can get that into a 5-3, I pretty much can increase my average nightly rate, which is around 2 to 250 to probably about 400 to 450. And that's pretty much double the increase on that revenue, and it makes a huge difference. And when you're looking in properties to purchase, the cool thing with Colorado is that they most of the homes here do have basements, whether they're finished or unfinished. And those basements, add those extra 2 to 3 bedrooms that you're able to take advantage of for short-term rental. Um, Updates on interior or major appliances. This is a key thing to kind of look for when you're looking at properties. I mentioned before, if you're looking for a fixer upper, obviously that's not going to play a big part. But when you're crunching the numbers and trying to get an understanding of, how much money is going into this property, those do play a big part. And what these updates of interior and major appliances are, starting with major appliances, is your furnace, water heater, the overall HVAC to see if it's in good shape, the roof, sewer line. These are all big appliances that make kind of a make or break for your deal, especially if you're looking for properties that you want to be pretty much turnkey and being able to go in and just update the home with furnishings and design. If you're having to replace a roof, which you're looking around, 20 to 30 grand, sewer line, depending where it is, that's a good 10 to 20 grand. A furnace, air conditioning, things like that, $10,000 to $15,000. So they're big expenses that when you're looking for a property, especially if you don't want to take on a big fixer upper project, do play a big part on what you're looking for. You want to make sure those are within 10 to 5 years old, because after you're getting with a furnace, once it gets to about 15 to 20 years, you're not able to certify it. It's most likely towards the end of its life. Um, Also, in regards to updates, looking for a home, if you don't want to take on that fixer upper, is key on finding a home that's pretty much fully renovated and updated. Um, with Airbnb, you do put a lot of work into the home, designing it, furnishing it, changing a few things throughout. That's all some big expenses that you're going to be dealing with. If you're taking on a home where you need to knock down a wall or add different things to make the home up to date and designed, it's really going to play a part into your overall return on your investment. You are updating it and making it better, but it's always a better route to look for a property that's already had updates and things changes to it, so you don't have to kind of worry about those changes. One big thing is the unique amenities or layouts. That kind of ties back into like the updates of the home. With the design of Airbnb and kind of a side thought is, you do see some of the people posting about how Airbnb is dying, things like that. That's not the case. It's really just changed to a professional business. It's really something that you're taking on and creating a business that's going to be successful. And parts that play into that is the unique amenities and layout. Being able to have a home that's designed that's very open, um, a lot of light coming in, space to where people can come and hang out together rather than it being closed off. A lot of the older homes have, a lot of rooms, a lot of walls that close off the space. Being able to have a home that's open and wide, a big backyard, open space where people can all hang out and talk, that's where you're really getting the biggest advantage with a property, with updates. And then in regard to amenities, that's a big part with Airbnb. You're really taking on and focusing on the experience with Airbnb now. Your whole goal with short-term rental is creating an experience for that guest. And those kind of experiences are, floor games, the sauna you can see there, a pool. Metro homes with a pool, you're looking at a huge return. A bare minimum, you're looking at roughly a gross of, 150 to $200,000 in gross revenue with the pool, just because one, Colorado is so rare with pools that it's actually plays a huge part in actually getting a good profit. You are looking at, more expenses, a little bit more challenges in regards to keeping it up. But pools actually play a huge part, but it is a huge amenity. Hot tubs is another one. You can see there's sauna, putting greens, floor games, creating kind of a fun, friendly, family designed home plays a huge part, which kind of ties right into the yard size and features. Being able to have a big yard to actually add these different things play a big part. You don't want a small yard. Having a small yard's not a big deal, but again, tying back into the experiences, having that space for people to hang out and enjoy your Airbnb are going to play a huge part in your overall return and your overall bookings. I have a great example. I added a hot tub to my property, my Airbnb, this past year, and I've already seen a 30% increase in bookings and my overall price being able to increase because of adding a hot tub. It's amazing to see these small amenities play such a big part. Let me just check real quick. All right, next, moving on to Airbnbs in the mountain areas. If you guys are interested in looking at Airbnb in the mountain area, these are a few of the steps that you'd want to look at when you're looking at a property in the mountains. Obviously, the Front Range here, secondary mountain areas with Colorado are big and very popular. Examples are like Bailey, Fairplay, Alma, um, Grand Grand Lake, Granby. These are all big mountain areas that you wouldn't particularly see. You think of Breckenridge and Vail, which are main ski resort areas. You'd be surprised on how successful secondary mountain areas are. For example, like Evergreen's another good one that's just in Jefferson County with the new regulations is going to be a very successful space. One, it's only 30 minutes away from downtown Denver, but you still have a full mountain experience. But one things to look for in an Airbnb when you're trying to build out and get that portfolio for a mountain property, septic size is going to be one very important part. A lot of the mountain communities within Colorado control their regulations through septic size. So a lot of them control it based off, amount of people you can have within your property on the septic size. So if you're looking at like a home that looks beautiful, but it's only a two-bedroom septic, usually like for example Park County, you're probably only able to get four people in that property because they base it off of two people per bedroom for septic size. So if you're looking to really take advantage of your return on investment and being able to get the most people in your property, obviously mountain properties, head count doesn't play as big of a part, but it does play a part, especially on the quality of the home. Obviously with a metro property, getting up to that 13 or 14 people is great. Most mountain properties, you're going to have a pretty good success with around 8 to 10 occupancy capabilities. Just because you're getting families up there, it's not really seen as like a party place when getting those kind of people. Obviously, the maximum occupancy would be great, but your most commons around that 6 to 8 to 10 people. But that's why septic size does play a big part, and you got to factor in if you are looking at overall costs and things like that that affect. If you find a home that's a beautiful designed home ready to go, but it's only a 2 or 3 bedroom septic and it has maybe 4 or 5 bedrooms. In order to take advantage of those extra bedrooms, on a regulation perspective, you're probably going to have to upgrade your septic, and you're looking around $30,000 to $50,000, probably about 20 to 30K starting, and then you're looking at about 10 to 12K per bedroom of septic size of increase. So it is a big expense that you'd be looking at in regards to increasing the septic size to get that occupancy account up. Again, kind of similar to the Metro updates and interior major appliances, that kind of goes hand in hand on both. It's a home, it's a property, especially in the mountains, does get a little bit more wear and tear with kind of that mountain weather. So a lot more snow. So the roof does play a big part. Um, Sewer line, this is something you'd want to check always, even though it's just going into a septic tank, it still, does get some wear and tear through it. And then major appliances. One big thing with mountain properties, it's most likely you're not going to see like a forced air system unless it's an updated, newer home. Most of these homes in the mountain have like a boiler, radiant heating system. So it's a little bit different from just, a gas hookup to a furnace. These are boiler systems that are a lot more intricate. So it does have a lot more going into it with baseboard heating. So it is something to check on to make sure it's in good shape and good running order to make sure that it's not something you have to replace. In regards to unique amenities and layouts, again, these are things that you can change and add to the property once you take ownership. But something that plays a big part is how unique that home is. Views is an amenity that, you're looking for on a property that does play a big part. You can't really control that. Maybe you can cut down some trees here and there, but again, if you're up on a kind of a flat space, you're kind of limited in with the views that you have. And layout's a big part. With these mountain properties, again, that open floor plan, big windows, open space really makes a big part on comparison to some of these cabin homes that have log designs where it's very kind of closed out. Just overall return and um, like bookings, you're seeing a lot more bookings and appeal for homes that are a lot more open design. One example and one I would say caveat is like an A-frame home, where that next kind of leads into the next link. Next bullet of home style and features. A-frame homes are, for some reason, the bread and butter in mountain areas. You are blown away. This is a good example right here. This one is located in Alma. Um, I think it's only a 2 bedroom home, so it can only sleep 4 people. So it's a small place, but it does over $180,000 a year in gross revenue, which is insane because, it's such a small property. But the unique design of an A-frame being in the mountains of Colorado is just very sought after. Everyone wants to kind of experience that, and it makes such a huge difference. So if you're looking for, again, kind of that roadmap of, being able to supplement your income, finding these key things of a property that is so unique in design that it's going to be successful and stand out from the rest. Next big thing is well quality. As most of there's droughts going on here in Colorado. That does play a part with wells, especially in the mountain. I recently did hear, in discussions within our organization at Good Neighbor, that Valley of the Sun is actually having a little challenging, which is up in Fairplay in regards to well digging. They're digging down pretty far and they're starting to experience some well dry ups, which is a little concerning, but it's always something to look into. And when going through the inspection process of the home you're purchasing, getting a good well test and well pressure to make sure you're still pulling a good amount of water plays a big part with mountain properties because most of these homes are going to be on a well system. Your second option is like a cistern system where you have holding tanks within your home. Challenge with that is you're going to have to be shipping in water and bringing it up, based off how much usage you're having. We'll stop real quick. Did anyone have any questions? Is everything sounding good so far? Sweet. I'll take that as a yes. Right, moving on to loan types. So this is again kind of the roadmap onto the process of purchasing your home. One big one, that's a very common thing done with a lot of investors is house hacking. It's a great way to build that portfolio and increase your portfolio and revenue. while continuing to live in properties. And house hacking gives you that option. Another great thing is the loan types with house hacking. You have first-time home buyer loans, primary residence loans, FHA, VA loans, credit union loans. All these loans are great because they're primary residence loans, which means you can get, as low as like 3 or 5% down. And a big part of increasing your portfolio and overall equity in homes is limiting the amount of money you're putting down. You know you're going to be putting down a good amount of money for building out your home, with furnishings, designs, all these different things. And being able to put as little down when you're purchasing this home makes a big part in where you can actually take that cash and put it towards other things, like that design and build out of your home. So with these, you can get as little as 3 or 5% down with your primary residence. And if you guys don't know what a house hack is, it's essentially you living in the home and being able to rent out the other part of the home. Here in Colorado, that is big, especially with the fact that there's so many basements in Colorado. Being able to find a home with a walkout capability, and then you could rent that while living above, or vice versa, living in the basement while you're renting out the top, makes a big part. One of my clients has a amazing home in Denver. She lives in the basement, which is a two-bedroom down there, but actually the top floor has 6 bedrooms. So it's actually performing, as well or better than most whole home properties because it has so many bedrooms. Obviously, your revenue numbers aren't going to be as high with house hacking since you are going to be only renting out part of the home. But another big benefit with house hacking and that kind of roadmap of building out your portfolio and living off that money that you can build, after about 3 years, you can actually continue to do house hacking again. It's called serial house hacking. And what you'd be doing is you'd be purchasing a home that is allowed to be a full home rental in areas such as Wheat Ridge, Arvada, things like that. You live in it for 3 years, and then you can actually move on and go and buy another home and do a house hack and get that same primary residence loans with that 3 to 5% down. And then from there, you turn that home that you were previously living in into a whole home rental, which you are doubling your income and return on that property because you're turning into a whole home from just 2 bedrooms to possibly 4 or 5 bedrooms. And then you continue that process again with another 3 years with the house hack design and supplementing your current mortgage on your new home that you're moving into. And the cool thing with that, you can keep growing and getting possibly bigger homes and growing from there. So when in the next 3 years, you can turn that home into a much bigger home that can even increase your profits even more. Again, with loan types for whole home rentals, kind of changing it up to this is the route of going, if you're deciding to purchase a home like a mountain property or a home that's going to be a whole home rental at all times. These are kind of the different loans. Again, it's going to be taking out a little bit more money out of your pocket just because they are requiring either, the 15 or 20% down to purchase the home. Um, but again, if you can find a way, depending on your credit, you can get as little as 15% down. I have heard some 10% downs, but again, it's just a way to kind of being able to turn your house into a full home rental capability. And that's where you're going to be taking advantage of that. But these are some of the loans that you can kind of go with that second home and vacation home. If you do live in the Denver metro area and you're looking for a mountain property, they do require roughly about 50 miles. Believe it's 50 miles distance from your current home to be able to be eligible for your second or vacation home. And then if you're like a high income earner, or if you are an independent contractor or something like that, to where it's a little bit more challenging from a W-2, DSCR loans play a big part. They do have a higher interest rate, but they require a little bit less information, especially if you aren't, a W-2 earner. So you're seeing those taxes coming across. DSCR loans play a big part, and it's very common with investors looking to kind of build out their portfolio. Hard money loans, these are a little bit more aggressive. If you are a big investor and you're really building out that portfolio, you hear these a lot with fix and flips where they're putting hard money down, and then building out their home, redesigning it, and then selling it. But in regards to kind of going the route of investment and holding on properties, it's a little bit harder with that. HELOC, home equity line of credit, those are also common with investors. If you don't have much cash on hand, but you possibly have some good equity in a possible property you have, you're able to take some of that money out of your current property and put it towards the purchase of another home. Seller financing, this is a little bit more rare. You saw these that were actually pretty popular about a year ago in regards to purchasing homes because of the interest rates being so high. So with seller financing, you can actually work with the seller on them kind of holding the loan that they currently have, especially if they've had a loan for 10 years and they have a low interest rate of like 2%. You can actually do a seller financing where you kind of put yourself secondary on the deed and still receive the deed, but they would still be on the loan. And what you would be doing is paying them their mortgage amount plus a certain percentage. And the benefit with this is you're actually getting a much lower loan price. And usually it's, set up with like a 5-year balloon, hoping, within that 5 years that you're able to get a loan where interest rates are dropping. Um, Credit union loan, it's not really a set loan, but a lot of people don't realize that credit unions provide some great loan products. Most of them, and some of them are actually nonprofits, so they don't really have to deal with the Fannie Mae process. So they can go on a case by case basis based off credit score and things like that. Provide a pretty good loan option with pretty good low interest rates in comparison to some of the major brands out there. So after all that process, you're at the step where you purchased your home. You found that home that's unique and designed or set up that's something that you can see as a benefit. And obviously, working with Good Neighbor here, we provided you from this step up the whole pro forma that kind of gives you a good understanding of the build out of the home and what it can actually do. From there, it's kind of the steps of after your purchase process. And these are the things that, again, kind of tie into that roadmap that I'm talking about of being a successful Airbnb and maximizing your return on your investment and making the most money every year, and then being able to realize how much profits you're making because of this. And the big things are design and build out. As I mentioned earlier, where I mentioned how people think Airbnbs are dead. That's not the case. Again, it's a professional business. It's turned into something that you need to do that extra effort to design and create an Airbnb that's going to be a successful Airbnb, and it's going to blow the other ones out of the water. And the reason why you're hearing people, the Airbnb is dead or something's not working, is because a lot of those homes that might have flooded the market years ago, where it was just taken with some iPhone photos. People kind of filled it in with, mismatching furniture and threw in some beds and things like that of extra that they had at their current house. Those aren't working anymore. Those homes aren't being successful. You're not maximizing your profits that way. People aren't booking those because it's not a great experience. What you're seeing now in the best experience is these professional designs. I don't know if some of you follow with Good Neighbor. We obviously opened up a new design company within Good Neighbor called Weekend House. They come in and design your property, but we have a lot of connections with designers throughout the whole process that we can connect you with. But I highly recommend a professional design coming in and getting a whole storyboard built out of your property, of what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve based off the style and look of your home plays a big part. Next is style design over dominant theme. This is, easily argued with some people. Obviously, each home can be unique, and if it's got a unique look to where it can design a certain theme, but themes are starting to fade away, where you see a set theme kind of throughout the whole home, like a game style theme with game designs on the wall, things like that. It's starting to fade out. What's becoming more important is just the style design, which you can also argue that it is a theme, but the style plays a big part. If you're going with like kind of like a Western style is a little bit different than a Western theme, where it's the furniture is a little bit more Western and the furniture is kind of set up to a style. Or if you're going with like a modern look, the furniture is more modern, but it's not exactly a theme. So I know it's kind of hard to describe, but big theme style homes are starting to fade out. It's not as popular compared to a beautifully styled home. And that is where your designers are coming in with that, you know, color schemes and furniture schemes that all tie together to make it a beautiful and a nice, enjoyable experience. Um, Worth the upfront costs. What I mean by that is it can be a little daunting to see what the costs are. Usually you're looking between like $15 to $20 per square foot working with a designer. And that's just kind of getting the home design, not including the furnishing and the costs and all that. Um, it's a big hit. You're looking at a good amount of money after making a big financial purchase of a home, and it can be pretty scary. You do have to keep in mind, which I'll follow up in the next slide, is you are creating a business, one things that can be written off, as well as this is a long-term business that you are putting an investment in. You need to understand that these things do cost a lot to be installing and creating, but on a long-term perspective, you are going to be seeing the returns based off your bookings and how well the home's doing on revenue. It's definitely worth the upfront costs. Kind of ties into the one below: invest in the amenities, but quality over cost. It is very important to be looking into the furniture rather than the look of it. Obviously, look plays a big part, but you do want to care about the quality of it. These things are going to be going a lot of turnover with people going, sitting and using these furnitures day in and day out. Focusing on the quality of that furniture and the things you were buying for that home make a big difference. So you're not replacing it after a year because it's getting weared out, rather than thinking about the cost, whether that's super cheap, it looks good, but it will work. There's a lot of kind of not name brand, but ones that, are a lot cheaper than what something could be on a quality makes a big part. Um, Back up to the invest in amenities. This is a big, big part. Again, like I mentioned before, amenities play a huge part because Airbnb and just short-term rental has shifted into the experience. The idea is you're creating an experience for these individuals that are coming and booking your home. You need to create that experience that they don't want to leave, even though they're coming here and half the time they might not even use it. But it's, again, ties into the marketing of Airbnb and short-term rental, on being able to click onto that property and be like, "Oh, I would love to stay there for a couple days." And that's where amenities come in. With the putting green, if you have the capability of putting in a volleyball court, anything that people want to stay there and enjoy with their friends and family, plays a huge part on the success and long-term growth and wealth of your property. You see the sauna there, pool, hot tubs, all these different things play a huge part in the amenities that you're providing on your property. You do have a lot of competition out there, especially, Arvada, for example. You being able to stand out from the rest, you'll see a huge increase in your revenue because of that. Another thing is take the time to cover every detail. This is kind of tying into the review side of things. You don't want to launch your property and risk getting bad reviews. Reviews do, I wouldn't say make or break your property, but they do play a big part. Being able to hold up above that 4.9 or 5.50 review capability plays a part in the algorithm with short-term rental and Airbnb, as well as the success of your property, being able to people read reviews and seeing that it's what you want. And the way to take the time and cover every detail, you're looking at as small as, the salt shakers, what kind of things you have in your kitchen supply cabinet. These are all things that make a big part. I always recommend you staying in your property for about 2 to 3 days, just living there and experiencing that to see if it really has everything that you want an amenity wise. I had a bad experience when I first launched. I didn't stay in my property, and my shower stopped working for the guests on my first guests. Luckily, I did get a bad review from it, but it was an unfortunate experience that I had to deal with, and realize that you do need to take the effort and focus on the small things with your property to make sure it's being launched for success. So long term, it's going to be a successful property. I kind of mentioned it overall. Be a differentiator. Make your home stand out and better than the rest. I always recommend with my clients, and if you are looking at properties, going through AirDNA, which is a website that kind of pulls and scrapes all the Airbnbs throughout the area that you're looking at, and you can click onto the top properties and see what those homes are doing to be a top property, and maybe rip a little bit from that, and then add some extra features to your home that's going to stand out. And these are all things, again, like a kind of the big picture is that this is a business that you're creating, and your goal long term is to take those funds and returns that you're getting, so you can live off the returns and revenue that you're getting from these Airbnbs. And that's where it makes a big part, being a differentiator as an Airbnb from the rest, that you're be getting the bookings and you're being able to maximize the profits from this property. So next is the tax benefit. If a lot of you guys follow us, this is a pretty main topic that we talk about, mainly because it's such a great loophole for short-term rentals and looking at long term on making that revenue and maximizing your profits as a business for short-term rental. Um, what that is the STR loophole, which is a cost segregation study and doing that after you purchase your home. And what is essentially doing with the new bill that came out, it's giving you 100% bonus depreciation back. And since short-term rental is considered a business, you are able to write off 100% um, of your property with a cost segregation study. And a cost segregation study is essentially taking the depreciation of your property rather than over the 27 or 30 years. You are able to pull that up front with a cost segregation study on your home, which is taking the land, the furniture, the home, all these different things that are depreciating on your home over time and being able to pull it up front and write it off 100% on your taxes if you're a high W-2 earner, or overall it's your active income taxes that you're able to write off. This is a huge benefit, especially for short-term rental, especially if you are trying to build your portfolio. Being able to do this on a yearly basis, especially if you're a higher income earner, being able to write that off and get that money back rather than having to pay it to the government plays a huge part on that overall goal of being able to supplement your income and be able to live off your short-term rental. um, a good example would be, say you bought a home for $1 million, you do a cost segregation study. Usually you're looking at between 20 to 40% of that being able to be write off, and you're able to do 100% of that. So say that's 300 to $400,000 you're able to write off onto your taxes. um, there's a few things that you do need to keep in mind while doing this. Is material participation. You do need to participate um, in your property for at least 100 hours within that year. And what that means is, if you're going there and tracking your hours of going and working on the home, doing the extra efforts of furnishing it, building out the furniture, these are all things that you're doing to get your property up and running, play a part. But, if you go from the beginning of purchasing your home and handing it over to a property manager or something like that, that does take away from your ability to get to that 100 hours. So this is a key thing that you need to do. You need to put the effort in. Benefit is that it works on a fiscal year. So we had a big push actually, come the end of year of September, November, people trying to buy those homes and then they furnish it and do all that. And they're able to take advantage of that fiscal year. And because of that, come December 31st or January 1st, that clock resets. So if you get that 100 hours and you get it all set, you can actually get a property manager Jan 1 and have them take advantage of that and run the home yourself. And you're just getting the paychecks after that. But if you get those 100 hours in, it still applies to that cost segregation and study you can do and still take advantage of that tax benefit. Another big part is your average stay. So this doesn't play a big part, if you were purchasing a home now, but if you're looking towards the end of the year, November, December, and getting your home up and running and launched to take advantage of the 2025 tax benefit, you need less than 7 days average stay. So you probably need about 2 bookings before the end of the year to take advantage of that. Um, Couple disclaimers to think about with this is clawback. This again is a play as long term. You can say you're kicking the can down the road type of situation in the way of taxes, but since they are pulling up that depreciation up to year one, you need to think about that you don't plan on selling this home for a good amount of time. The whole goal, again, with that 9 to 5, as I was mentioning, of supplementing your income and maybe doing this long term, is that this is a long term play. You need to think about this as a long term play, 20 plus years type of thing, to where, if you decide to sell this property after a few years, the government's going to be coming back to claw back that money that you wrote off. So you need to keep that in mind. There are ways around it. If you do plan to increase your portfolio with a bigger, better property, you can 1031 exchange, which kind of kicks the can over to the next property in that sense. But you do need to keep in mind that by doing a cost segregation study, you are pulling those funds up over that 27 years to year one. So you need to factor that in if you think you're only doing this for a few years. Next, another big thing. Oh, sorry, Susan, you just had a question. Let me look at that. Sorry. She said, if you have an STR and do the segregation, bonus depreciation, and then 10-day exchange to a new STR 3 years later, can you do a new cost segregations? That's a good question. I'd have to get the exact details on from a tax professional in regards to that, but that I'm aware of, doing a 1031 exchange, you're essentially just passing over. You can do a cost segregation on the new property that you have, but let me get a confirmation on that. That's a great question. I'd have to ask just from a tax perspective, what that might affect either way. Um, but I believe you can. All right. This is again, I know I keep mentioning it, it's just tying back into that roadmap. This is a big part of that roadmap. Um, is automations. Automations really make or break, not make or break, but they make things that much easier in your life if this is a path that you're trying to go and build that portfolio and growth. But a lot of people are concerned with like, oh, the headaches and the issues and dealing with people. Obviously that's always going to happen. You are, with short-term rental investing, just Airbnb in general, it is the hospitality business. It is going into the hospitality. The fact that the guests most of the time are always right. That's a challenging statement, but obviously, unfortunately, you kind of, like I mentioned, live off of good reviews and things like that. And you need to do the necessary steps to get that. But with that said, time management is key. Being able to do this successfully and without as much headaches and challenges plays a huge part in that success. And automations with channel management and CRM systems help give you that capability um, to be successful. Um, Few examples right off the bat in regards to those channel management systems. And of course, like I mentioned with the property managers, a lot of the property managers do this all for you. So it's really nothing you have to deal with. But again, if you want to take advantage of that cost segregation and maybe do it yourself, I personally always recommend doing it yourself. If you use these channel management, you could really do it pretty efficiently and easily without going and losing, that 20% off the top with an actual property manager with Airbnb or short-term rental. Um, but Guesty, Logify, HostAway, these are all those channel management systems, and they help with automated messaging, overall um, calendar organizations, responses, everything that you can really do that really kind of take that automation or that manual work away from you. You can have a lot of created automated messages of people who have quick questions that are pretty much a normal FAQ that you'd be experiencing. You can get those all plugged in and it automatically responds to where you're not even actually doing that effort. Guesty also syncs all your calendars. So if you are on multiple platforms, which is, for example, like hotels.com, VRBO, Airbnb, you can sync all these things with the channel management so you could see where the bookings are. So you're not running the risk of somebody getting a double booking on a day that you have um, one booking from one platform to the other. It eliminates that capability. So it keeps everything set. Um, Plays a huge part. I think the biggest benefit is the automated messaging. Being able to have this set up to where a few days before you're able to, it automatically sends out your welcome packet, all your information, all the rules and regular rules within your property of what they need to uphold to. You're not doing any of that. It's all automatically set. It's all being sent out. It's nothing that you're dealing with. Everything's being covered in that sense, other than the few 5 or 10% of the random questions that someone might have that you can respond to. But most of the time, all these questions are pretty common that you're going to be getting, and you can create these automated messages that are coming through. AI is even getting more and more advanced, so I think it's going to be playing a big part even more into this, to where it almost creates and designs its own messages without you even having to create automated messages beforehand. Another big one is Price Labs. 'Price Labs' is an amazing tool that, really takes some time to get an understanding to, but if you're committed into the work and effort of doing this process, I highly recommend you doing the necessary steps to understand price labs at a whole. There are a lot of different rules and customizations you can create with price labs to maximize your profits. Airbnb, VRBO, short-term rental in general, these pricing strategies to be successful and maximize your profits are changing on a daily basis. These numbers are changing constantly, always adjusting based off what's going on, and Price Labs does a great job of taking um, that data that's being changed, with events, different things that are going on, and seasonalities that are within your area of your Airbnb, and putting in the pricing because of that. And you can actually control the different types of pricing and discounts and rules you can change into this through Price Labs, and it automatically is updating your pricing. So you're pretty much at the almost the cent of maximized profits for that day of that booking you're getting. There's a lot of property managers. I have a colleague of mine within Good Neighbor that put the effort in of Price Labs, and he can take over your account to maximize your profits. Everyone that I've talked to that used him, you're seeing around 15 to 20% increase in revenue because of that, which is a huge part. But it is another fee that you'd be looking at. So if you're willing to take the time and effort of learning Price Labs, there's a lot of different tutorials on YouTube, um, things like that you can take advantage of and kind of get an understanding to maximize your profits. And again, I'm not, pushing him away or anything like that, but I always recommend, trying to learn it yourself so you can long term maximize your profits with automations. And this is one of the steps of doing that. Turno is another great one. Turno is a cleaning website. We at Good Neighbor have multiple cleaners and contacts, just from all of us being in investments. But Turno is another great website that I'd recommend you going on to, and kind of a high level of what you're doing is you're putting in your listing, your information, how you want the home clean, the steps necessary to take it, and then you actually have cleaners bid on your property based off pricing. And it's a great way to kind of build a portfolio of cleaners, whether you have one that's specific in your main cleaner, but then you have three or four backups. It really plays a big part, especially in, I'd say, mountain towns. Mountain towns, you are a little limited in regards to the amount of people around. So I always highly recommend building out your infrastructure of contacts with handyman, cleaners, things like that. And Turno is a good way to kind of help you through that process. Property managers, again, I kind of mentioned it earlier. They usually take 15 to 20% off the top, but if you don't really want to deal with that and just want to kind of get the checks coming in after doing the necessary steps of building out your property and kind of doing the self work of with a cost segregation, it's a great way to kind of step back and take hands off. We have a lot of clients that do property managers and they just get checks every month. Through that process, but it is something to keep in mind that you're probably looking around 15 to 20% off the top of your overall revenue, by using a property manager. Supplies redundancies, big thing. Again, it kind of ties into what I mentioned earlier of understanding the small little things of your property. Always recommend you having 3 to 4 sets of sheets per bed, extra everything pretty much 2 to 3 extra of, in your owner's closet, just to be sure to keep everything covered. If you get somebody ruining the sheets, something like that, it's always good to have it ready to go and replace, because especially coming now into the busy season of Airbnb, I looked at my calendar today. I have about 4 double bookings coming up in the next month. So that means somebody's checking out at 10, somebody's coming right thing in at 4. If they let me know there's something broken or destroyed, I know that I have a replacement ready to go into the property to cover it. Um, Another big thing with automations, business accounts, LLCs. These kind of go hand in hand together. I always recommend getting an LLC. It's not a huge thing. I see the benefit with it as just being able to kind of differentiate everything. Again, like I mentioned, this is a business. If you're planning on creating a portfolio to where your supplemental income becomes your main income, being able to create LLCs per property, having bank accounts business setup for everything is just a great way to keep organized and set to know exactly what you're doing because it's your business and you're creating it. You don't really want to dilute funds with personal things like that. Just gets a lot more challenging. Creating a business account and an LLC allows you to do that. You're creating an LLC, you have a business card, it creates everything that you can write off. You can create different, and then you can through taxes have it all separate that way to create a K1 towards your income. It just makes things that much easier and really just the process automated and simpler. Finally, repeat. Guys, I talked a lot about everything here. I misspelled process right there, so I apologize for that. But um, once you get it down the first time, you really can start to see the science behind it. It's not as diluted and crazy as it might seem at the beginning process. There's a lot of science behind all this on being able to get an understanding of the design and style of home, the uniqueness, the amenities, all these things that play a big part. You just by looking at the pro formas and things that we help and build out, you'll see that the revenue numbers are going to be consistent on what you're doing. Airbnb is not dying, like I keep saying. It's really just being able to take advantage and doing it to a science and knowing that the professional designs and efforts and amenities and the style of the property you're doing is going to be successful if you take those steps necessary to make it. If you get the automations correct, if you take advantage of the tax loophole and get that money back and then continue to just keep growing that portfolio, you can be making upwards, depending on the home. And if you keep increasing that portfolio and maybe buying a more expensive home, take the leap, take the risk, as I mentioned, and purchasing something that's a little bit more, outside your comfort zone and expensive, but being able to see the science behind it of how well that home can be successful, you'll be able to see those revenue numbers being increasing, starting from, like an example, my Wheat Ridge property, my gross revenues around, 80, 90. So I'm probably netting around 20K, which isn't amazing. But if I finish out that basement, I can kick it up to 50. My next property, hopefully being a mountain home, could be increasing, making about 200K revenue, which could be another 60K, 70K of net revenue. So that's already 120 grand just from two properties that you can be making. And if you think about it that way on a long-term perspective, as well as doing those tax write-offs and getting all that money back and then growing from there, you're just going to keep making money to where it's going to be making more than what your 9 to 5 does on a yearly basis. And you could just move into that path. So it's really an amazing thing. But again, understanding and knowing the steps you need to take in that roadmap to look at it not emotionally, but as a business makes a big part. Um, yeah, and that's kind of what I finished off with. Finally, this is a couple things with Good Neighbor. These are kind of the resources we provide if you decide to work with us. We have events. You probably get emails through our Eventbrite. This is one example. We have webinars, we have events in person. We host a lot of happy hours at a lot of our clients' properties that are successful, and you can get an understanding both house hack and whole home. We have the short-term rental course. We do the underwriting, as I mentioned. We have a seller's guide, so we also sell properties. We do off-market properties, clients who might be getting out of the Airbnb, so it's a great advantage to take advantage of purchasing an active Airbnb and pretty much just jumping right into it. Um, we have a podcast, buyer's guide. This is the course. If you wanted to take our course, this pretty much walks you through on a very in-depth level of what I kind of went over. um, it's pretty much every single step you could possibly think of. We took hours of creating these videos that kind of walk you through every step from start to finish all the way to launch. It's a good way to kind of get an understanding of how to do this and do it yourself. So if you want to use a code, you can get a 50% off. There's a podcast. I haven't listened to it recently. I don't know if they've done too many videos, but it's a good way. Again, kind of just kind of talking about short-term rental investing and the steps you can take to kind of become financially free. Here's all our socials, and then finally, this is my information. Feel free to call me anytime. I'm happy to kind of dive a little bit deeper into what I talked about. We can get into the weeds on each step. I'm happy to help you find a new property. There's a lot more new regulations that have come out with Short-term rental, Jefferson County released new regulations. Park County's adjusting, so there's a lot of areas to take advantage of short-term rental um, here in Colorado. So feel free to reach out to me anytime. That's my Instagram. There's my direct line, and then my email. Thank you. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Happy to answer anything. Just looking at Joy, you said, what do you look for in a fixer up? Yeah, Joy, to answer your question in regards to um, what I look for in a fixer upper, there's a lot of things, obviously. Bedroom count, as I said, difference in mountain homes versus metro. So metro, probably bedroom count. If you're looking at a home that might have an unfinished basement, you could add a few more. If it's already like a four bedroom, you could possibly make it a six. That plays a big part. Um, just the overall design of the home. Most fixer uppers, you're looking at, kind of the older homes in the 70s and 60s, which I think stand out a little bit more in uniqueness. The house I live in now is an old mid-century modern design home. When I walked into it, it had, yellow walls and all this stuff, but I overall saw the growth of it. I'm knocking down a couple walls, and you could see the expansion and growth and potential of it. Being able to open up spaces, I think, play a big part. So you could look at some of the old fixer uppers, and they have a lot of walls, and if you're able to knock down some of the walls and see how open it could become, plays a big part. Um, Mountain properties, fixer uppers, I wouldn't say are as common. If you're going the route of a fixer upper with a mountain property, it's almost sometimes smarter to maybe try to like buy a lot for 50K or something like that, and then put a prefab or something like that on there. But fixer uppers, the A frames, I think are a big part. You're going to see a great return on your investment with like an A frame home or one of those unique kind of on stilt style homes on the side of mountains and stuff. Really something that just, you just jaw dropping, eye catching properties in mountain areas. Jonathan, and to answer your question, we have a lot of data on that. I can certainly kind of chat with you on it through our pro formas. There's a good amount of data that actually pushes out what amenities are going to be your biggest return. If your pools aside, because obviously if you find a home that's a pool, um, it's already going to crush it because of what it is, especially here in Colorado. But what you're seeing on your best amenities right now on overall return and price is going to be a hot tub for one. You look at around a 15 to 20% return on your investment with a hot tub. Next would be like a sauna. From there, game rooms. So saying to do right away, I would highly recommend if you have the capability of doing it, would be adding a hot tub or a sauna. One of those two or together is a big part, especially since we get snow wintertime. It's a highly sought after thing for Airbnb and short-term rental. From there, you can kind of just keep kind of growing and building out your Airbnb. Everyone kind of comes in at their own journey financially. So, putting in an investment of completely redoing a yard and adding all these things is just not achievable. Um, but it actually can long term benefit you because I have a great example of doing that. My backyard was just a dirt patch, slowly added things, and then I recently added turf and a putting green and a patio, got new photos done, and it rechanged my whole algorithm through Airbnb because when you update photos on a quarterly basis, it refreshes the algorithm of Airbnb and moves your listing up. So I actually saw a huge increase in bookings because of that. So changing your photos, things like that on a quarterly basis make a big part. But I personally, like I said, I'm still going to build out my basement. I added a hot tub recently, but I've had the Airbnb for about 3 years. And the hot tub's only been there for about 6 months. My backyard, probably about 8 months. So there's things you can keep adding. But if, right off the bat after purchasing, I would say a hot tub, um, sauna slash game room would be like the first thing I would try to add. Thank you. I'm running on 3 hours of sleep, so if I it didn't make sense at times, I apologize. Well, great. Thank you, everyone. We're wrapping up right at the 1 o'clock time. I appreciate you guys all sticking on here and listening. Let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to reach out to me at any time. Thank you.